This playlist collects together and organizes the component modules of the first of two lectures on Descartes' Meditations on First Philosophy. Now, in this lecture, we'll start off by talking about Descartes' life. And Descartes was famous and influential both during his life and, of course, even today. And so we'll want to spend a little bit of time going over some of the details of his life in order to get a better sense of who he was and how the times of his life shaped his views, even if you might already know some of this from other philosophy classes that you took. From there, we'll go on to sketch the background and project of the Meditations overall, and talk about Descartes' unique contribution, positive contribution to epistemology, that is, his articulation of a foundationalism about the nature of knowledge. Finally, with those background elements in place, we'll turn our attention to the actual text of the Meditations. And we'll look at the first meditation, wherein Descartes articulates and executes his negative epistemic project of destroying his former belief edifice by his accounts. And then the second meditation, where he begins to execute his positive epistemic project of recreating his belief apparatus, his worldview, in a way that is consistent with his overall views about the nature of knowledge. So let's take a look at Descartes' life. Descartes was born in La Haye. It's a small town in Touraine, France. He was born in 1596. Here's a Google map that indicates where La Haye is. Touraine is the province around it. Up here we see Paris. Down here we see Monaco, Montpellier, Toulouse, right? So this gives us some idea of where in France he was born. Now, Descartes is still revered, I think, in France, and particularly where he was born. Here's a picture of a statue in front of one of the local hotels in La Haye. Now, soon after Descartes was born, his mother passed away. And as a result, he lived with his grandmother and his great uncle till 1607. At that time, he entered the Jesuit College Royal Henry Legrand at La Flèche. It was essentially a boarding school. Now, Descartes didn't seem to like it there by his own accounts. He claimed to have learned little of substance there besides mathematics. Nevertheless, he did graduate from that institution in 1614 and then entered the University of Poitiers in 1615. He earned a baccalaureate and a license in canon and civil law from the University of Poitiers in 1616. In 1618, Descartes, who had been sort of leading unfocused life, joined the Protestant Dutch States Army, essentially as a mercenary, though he worked and studied as a military engineer in that army. During this time, he met the Dutch philosopher and scientist Isaac Beckman, and later in 1619, he reports having a series of dreams or visions or reveries, which he interprets as a divine sign that he should found a unified science of nature based upon mathematics, and which in part inspired his discovery or formulation of early elements of analytic geometry. He leaves the army in 1620 and returns to France. During his time in France, he writes Regularia ad Directionem Ingenii, or Rules for Direction of the Mind. In 1628, he moves to Holland, where he lives until 1641. Now, in Holland, he intends to write a comprehensive work presenting all aspects of his thinking unified into a coherent tome called Le Monde. However, when he hears of Galileo's condemnation by the church, which began really in about 1616 and culminates in Galileo's home imprisonment in 1633, he alters his plans. He doesn't want to do anything so bold or potentially dangerous. Instead, he decides to start publishing parts of Le Monde as separate works, and beginning in 1637, he executes this project by publishing his work Discourse on Method, and he publishes it taking a cue from Galileo, publishing it in French as opposed to the academic language of Latin, so that it had a wider audience and essentially sort of added to his fame and notoriety, and thereby giving him some shield against any potential repercussions of his views. Now, the discourse includes 3 other essays or appendices: La Dioptrique on dioptics, and Les Météores on meteors, and La Géométrie, in which he articulates early versions of analytic geometry. In 1641, he publishes the first edition of the book that we're studying, the Meditations on First Philosophy. In 1644, he publishes Principia Philosophica, Principles of Philosophy. Now, he intends Principles as a textbook on mathematical and physical subjects, where he offers treatments of terrestrial motions. Now, as a philosopher, Descartes is probably best known as a key early figure in continental rationalism for his formulation of the mind-body problem and for his articulation in contemporary format of external world skepticism. As a mathematician, he makes significant contributions to the eventual development of analytic geometry or algebraic geometry. And as a physicist, he's a co-discoverer of the sine law of refraction. He also offers a scientific account of rainbows, as well as a naturalistic account of the formation of the solar system. Descartes eventually leaves Holland in 1649 to join Queen Christina of Sweden as her tutor in philosophy. However, this doesn't work out very well for Descartes. For one thing, the Queen requires him to lecture her in her freezing cold bedroom at 5 in the morning. And within a year of moving to Sweden, Descartes dies of pneumonia. Now, Descartes' life is in some ways a microcosm of that particular time. It's a transition period between what we would think of normally as the scholasticism of the Middle Ages, which we'll talk about in just a second, and the development of the European Renaissance and scientific revolution. And we'll pick that up in the next lecture module.